It's commonly the case that you have some goal and you're sure you can do it, and then a few years go by and nothing's happened. Clean up your room any second now. You have that goal, you're sure you can do it, and then you graduate, never actually clean up the room. Sometimes you set a goal but never get around to it, and there's a particular psychology of that called implementation intentions. And then there's one last topic at the end, but we'll get to it at the end. If you're looking at slides, for some reason there's a picture of the 60s rock band The Byrds. If you're a younger viewer, on the upper right, you'll be able to see what human beings used to look like in the 60s. The reason the Byrds are up there is because I wanted some kind of intuitive introduction to the first topic. And if only everyone was 50 to 60 years old, you would all remember the great Byrds hit of the 60s, which draws on the lyrics, or its lyrics draw on the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, one of the Old Testament books of wisdom. I won't sing it now. And that would make this go viral. I won't sing it now, but what it is from Ecclesiastes is this set of lyrics that suggests that life consists of settings, stages, or circumstances in which there are appropriate times to do one thing versus another. Weep, laugh, mourn, dance. I guess they did a whole bunch of stuff back in the Old Testament days, including gathering stones. The point of the ancient wisdom of Ecclesiastes that's then picked up in a psychology theory we'll get, is that there are circumstances, even though they may be a little hard to define, and even though you may not actually explicitly be thinking, oh, this is a good time to gather some stones, there are social settings in which certain types of motivated behavior and certain types of strategies, things to do, intuitively make sense. They seem right. They're what you're supposed to be doing now at this season, and others don't seem quite right. That ancient wisdom is picked up in a modern motivation theory from a psychologist at Columbia University named Tori Higgins and colleagues, a theory called regulatory fit. So the theory that's regulatory fit is a slightly technical term for the fine intuition that's conveyed back in the old Ecclesiastes days of wisdom. The regulatory fit idea has a couple layers of ideas to it, and so we'll spell them out. There's two ideas there. Here, there's a circle around one of them if you're looking at the slides. One is the concept of motivational orientations. This phrase, motivational orientations, is essentially a 21st century motivation theory version of what Ecclesiastes had it in mind, that is, whoever the heck the writer was in that book, 2,000-something years ago, when talking about there being different states in which it seemed like you're implicitly doing one kind of thing versus one other kind of thing. Both of them are highly motivated, yet they're different kinds of things. Here, with our usual cartoonish illustrations, are two cases in which people are motivated. They want to do something, but they're doing different kinds of things. Sometimes, like the happy volunteer, what you're doing, even if you're not saying this to yourself word for word, if you talk to the person, ask how they're feeling, could read their mind, what they're doing is focusing on some positive accomplishment, a good thing that they hope will happen, that will promote some kind of their own good, the common good, the happy volunteer on the left. In that circumstance, people may be eager to get started. They're happy to go out there on a nice sunny day and build a house for the people who need a house. Other times, you also are committed to something, want to get something done, but it's a different kind of phenomenology, a different experience. What you're focused on is the fact that other people are counting on you to do something. You have to do it. You're obligated to do it. There's a bunch of duties or obligations. Rather than just being eager to get started and get going, what you tend to be is instead kind of focused on things that might go wrong, how hard it is to get started, people evaluating you who might point out things that are going wrong. The fancy word for this is you're vigilant. Rather than being eager and focused on positive things in the future, happy gent on the left, you're instead vigilant to things that might go wrong, which makes it hard to even get started in the first place. The idea from Higgins is that different types of behavior feel right or are fitting in these different motivational states. And there's going to be in a moment an experiment in which there's a simple and remarkably kind of clever way of testing this idea. But the idea is that in some settings, if you were volunteering on the bright sunny day and one of the volunteers started to talk about all the things that could go wrong, that would seem kind of funny. The spirit of the day is to kind of get started and accomplish something positive, and you seem kind of weird if you just talk about all the things that might go wrong. Yet, if you're sitting in a room full of people worried about this organic chemistry exam everybody's got to take for their pre-mediness, there it makes sense to focus on things that might go wrong, and the sort of happy-go-lucky eagerness will seem odd. The idea of Higgins' regulatory fit theory, as illustrated by this picture puzzle illustration that's coming up, is that different behaviors fit different motivational orientations. That's a slightly technical way to say what we've now introduced. Some types of actions, getting things done, accomplishing them, being eager to get started, makes sense to you if you're in a promotion orientation, if you look like the happy volunteer. Some other actions, checking for things that could go wrong, double-checking for things that could go wrong, avoiding those things that could go wrong, also make sense to the same you if you're in a different psychological state, one in which you're vigilant to things that can go wrong, a prevention orientation. So basically, underlying this Higgins idea is this concept that we see in various parts of psychology, that there, in a sense, are two very generic types of orientation: a positive, seek rewards and reinforcement, go, and a vigilant, something might be wrong, stop, avoidance kinds of motivation. The prediction, then, when you run a study, which will happen in just a moment, the prediction is that people will feel better about their behavior. They'll actually say, I would enjoy doing this as opposed to that, even when this and that look pretty darn similar, depending upon regulatory fit, whether the orientation they're in, the kind of mental state they're in, matches the strategy of trying to get something done, attainment, or avoid the bad, avoidance. Here's the clever study. Sometimes psychology studies are clever not because some big, elaborate thing happens in which there's somebody in the other room who seems to be a volunteer with a heart problem and is shocked to death, like we see in social psychology, but because there's a simple study that, on the face of it, looks like it might never work in the first place, and the simple study cleanly illustrates the principle. If you could have thought of this study, you could have run it easily, but you didn't. These people did. This is Tori Higgins and I believe Anthony Freitas, a colleague of his, who manipulate. You have to do two things to study motivational orientation and then its effects. One, of course, the independent variable is to manipulate motivational orientation. They do this really straightforwardly. At the start of a study, people show up at a psychology laboratory and are asked to write brief essays. In different conditions, they're asked to write about either, well, in one condition, their personal hopes and aspirations. So you sit down for a few minutes and you write about things you're trying to accomplish, your interests, your hobbies, what you might want to do, get through school, after school. I mean, after, like, when you're done with college. These are college students. Or participants are randomly assigned, of course, it's an experiment. And the other condition, to write about duties and obligations in life. Things that you're motivated to do, but because other people are expecting you to do them, you're obligated to do them as a member of your family, community, religious organization, whatever set of social, community, network, family ties you may have that pull you in the direction of doing things because it's your duty to do them. The idea is that anybody could be put into either of these two motivational states, and just a few minutes of writing an essay is sufficient to, at least temporarily, put you in that kind of motivational focus or motivational orientation. Then people are given a simple survey. Here's the survey, so simple that you'd think this won't make much difference. People are asked for a series of behaviors, and again, these are college students, so a lot of them are college study achievement oriented. They're asked to consider different strategies at school and to evaluate whether you would enjoy doing these. It's just like looks like a boring survey of college life. On the survey, some of the strategies describe positive accomplishments. Complete schoolwork promptly. Other items on the survey describe negative outcomes you might want to avoid. like stop procrastinating. Yes, if you take out your friend the thesaurus, complete promptly and stop procrastinating are the same thing. So you might think that anybody who wants to do something promptly is the same person who wants to stop procrastinating, and so there'll be no effects in this experiment. If they enjoy it or not, it won't make any difference. It's the same item. However, what happens, as now shown in this graph that will be popping up on your screen on the lower right, is that people report different amounts of enjoyment for these activities that seem synonymous in essence, but aren't really, based on whether the phrasing of the test items is getting something done promptly as opposed to avoiding a bad thing, procrastination. When people are focused on duties and obligations, it makes sense to them. They actually report that they would enjoy doing the, what's labeled here in the graph, the vigilant things. In the case of the two items up here, vigilant means procrastination is a bad thing. You'd want to be vigilant to avoid procrastinating, so stop procrastinating is a vigilant item. People say they would enjoy doing that more than completing things promptly if they previously have written about duties and obligations. It's the season to be vigilant. Whereas if they first are writing about their personal hopes and aspirations, it doesn't seem very enjoyable to avoid procrastinating, but it seems perfectly fine to get work done promptly. The immediate, does it make sense to me, would I enjoy doing this, varies depending upon, in this case, a simple manipulation of orientation. And Higgins' point is that this kind of experience is general. Obviously, he's just bringing into the lab, through a manipulation, something that he sees as being common all the time. There's some activities that you don't want to do, and you know things might go wrong. Others that, by your own choice, map onto your hopes and aspirations. In both cases, you may be motivated to do these things, but the phenomenology, the sheer feel of the motivation, changes considerably whether you're in the personal hopes domain as opposed to the duties and obligations domain, so much that the same activity, complete schoolwork promptly, can seem enjoyable versus not quite making sense in one versus the other setting. That doesn't conflict with the first set of lectures, the first lecture on motivation, but it kind of expands it. When we had goals and motivation for the first lecture, we didn't quite ask whether the goals were to do something good or avoid something bad, but that do good, avoid bad is a basic kind of feeling state difference in the world of motivation in the first of our three expansions of the first lecture.